The council chamber hummed with the low-frequency vibrations of a dozen different alien species breathing, clicking, and chittering in what passed for civilized discourse. Admiral Marcus Chun sat perfectly still in his chair, hands folded on the polished metal table, watching the assembled delegates argue about humanity's role in the upcoming conflict with the Void Swarm. "The human representative is too old," hissed Counselor Vex High, her serpentine head weaving back and forth as she spoke. The Naga diplomat's scales shimmered with agitation, shifting from deep purple to angry crimson. "Look at him. Gray hair, weathered skin. How can such an ancient creature lead our combined fleets against the greatest threat the galaxy has ever known?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The crystalline delegate, a being of pure silicon and light named Prism, chimed his response in harmonic frequencies that the translation matrix rendered as, "The human appears fragile. Our scans indicate his biological systems are operating at suboptimal efficiency. Perhaps a younger specimen would be more suitable for command." Marcus suppressed a smile. At 68 years old, he knew he looked every one of his years. The scars crossing his face and arms told stories these young species had never heard. The slight tremor in his left hand, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for, came from nerve damage sustained in battles fought before most of these beings were even born. Chancellor Throck of the Brutari Confederacy slammed one massive fist onto the table, his rocky exterior crackling with irritation. "The Brutari have fought alongside humans for 3 centuries. We know their worth in battle. But this one," the 8-foot-tall stone creature gestured dismissively at Marcus. "This one survived the First War, yes? That was 50 years ago. He is past his prime. 73 years ago, actually," Marcus said quietly, speaking for the first time since the session began. His voice carried easily through the chamber despite its soft tone. "And I didn't just survive it. I ended it." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of the life support systems seemed to pause. Counselor Zeph of the Ethereal Collective leaned forward, his translucent form shimmering with curiosity. "Ended it? The records state that the First War concluded with a negotiated surrender by the enemy coalition after the Battle of Kepler's Gate." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's what the records state, yes. You speak as if there is more to the story," observed Director Nkala of the Symbiont Republic, her forearms gesturing in complex patterns that conveyed respectful inquiry. "There always is," Marcus replied. He stood up from his chair with the careful precision of a man who had learned to move efficiently despite old injuries. Walking to the massive viewport that dominated one wall of the council chamber, he gazed out at the stars. The First War lasted 18 years. 18 years of the most brutal, desperate fighting this galaxy had ever seen. The Hegemony Coalition controlled 3/4 of known space. They had superior technology, superior numbers, and superior firepower. He turned back to face the assembled delegates. They had everything except experience with human warfare. The Vorthan representative, a being of pure energy contained within a mechanical shell, crackled with interest. Elaborate. Marcus walked back to his seat, but remained standing behind it, his hands resting on the chair back. The Coalition made the same mistake you're all making right now. They looked at humans and saw primitive bipeds with short lifespans and fragile bodies. They calculated our industrial capacity, our population, our technological level, and determined that conquest would be straightforward. According to historical data, their calculations were correct. Prism chimed. Humanity was outnumbered 300 to 1. Your weapons were inferior by several technological generations. All true, Marcus agreed. What they didn't calculate was that humans have been fighting each other for our entire evolutionary history. We were born in warfare, raised in conflict, and shaped by 10,000 years of increasingly sophisticated methods of killing each other. Vexai's scales shifted to a skeptical blue-green. Many species have histories of internal conflict. It does not make them superior warriors. Most species fight for territory, resources, or dominance. Marcus continued. Humans fight for ideas. We'll die for concepts that exist only in our minds. Honor, freedom, justice, love. The coalition never understood that they weren't just facing our military. They were facing our entire species united by the idea that we would not submit. Chancellor Throck rumbled his interest. The Brutari respect this sentiment. But sentiment does not win wars. Strategy and strength win wars. Marcus smiled then, an expression that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than friendlier. You're absolutely right. Which is why humanity spent the first 16 years of that war losing every major battle while learning everything we could about our enemies. The council chamber erupted in confused chatter. Director Nkala raised two of her arms for silence. You intentionally lost battles? We fought to lose slowly, Marcus clarified. Every engagement was designed to maximize intelligence gathering while minimizing our actual losses. We retreated when we could. We made tactical sacrifices that looked like strategic failures. We let the coalition think they were winning while we studied every aspect of their technology, their tactics, their psychology, and their weaknesses. The ethereal delegates form brightened with understanding. A long-term deception strategy. The longest in galactic history, Marcus confirmed. By the end of year 16, we had detailed intelligence on every coalition species, every ship class, every weapon system, and every command structure. We had identified the political tensions within their alliance, the resource bottlenecks in their supply chains, and the psychological profiles of their key leaders. He paused, looking around the chamber at the diverse collection of beings who now hung on his every word. And then we began the real war. Counselor Vexhai leaned forward, her earlier dismissal replaced by intense curiosity. What changed? Everything, Marcus said simply. In the span of 6 months, human forces went from losing every engagement to winning every engagement. We didn't just defeat coalition fleets. We annihilated them with such precision that survivors began to question whether they had ever fought humans before or some other species entirely. The chamber had grown completely silent now, all attention focused on the old human who suddenly didn't seem quite so old or fragile. The Battle of Kepler's Gate was the culmination, Marcus continued. The coalition had assembled the largest fleet in galactic history, 12,000 capital ships, supported by nearly 100,000 smaller vessels. They came to Sol System to end human resistance once and for all. The records indicate this battle lasted 17 hours, observed Prism. It lasted exactly 17 minutes, Marcus corrected. The other 16 hours and 43 minutes were spent accepting surrenders. The silence stretched for long moments before Chancellor Throck finally spoke. Ow! Marcus sat down in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his years again. Because by that time, we knew the coalition better than they knew themselves. We knew which commanders would break under pressure and which would fight to the death. We knew which species would prioritize individual survival over unit cohesion. We knew exactly which ships to target to create maximum psychological impact with minimum expenditure of resources. He gestured toward the viewport and the stars beyond. Most importantly, we knew that the coalition was an alliance of convenience, held together by the promise of easy victory and shared plunder. When faced with the reality of total defeat, it shattered like glass. Director Nkala made a complex gesture that the translation matrix rendered as profound respect. You turned their own knowledge against them. We turned their assumptions against them, Marcus clarified. They assumed humans were simple creatures driven by simple motivations. They never considered that we might be complex enough to sacrifice victories to achieve victory. Vexhai's scales had shifted to a deep, thoughtful violet. And now the Void Swarm approaches. Another seemingly unstoppable force with superior numbers and unknown technology. Marcus nodded. The Void Swarm represents a different challenge entirely. Unlike the Coalition, they don't appear to be driven by political or economic motivations. They consume everything they encounter, converting matter and energy into more of themselves. They learn and adapt with each encounter. Which is why some of us believe a younger, more vigorous commander might be better suited to this conflict. Prism chimed diplomatically. You're thinking like the Coalition, Marcus replied. You're looking at my physical age and assuming it represents my capabilities. You're making the same mistake they made about our entire species. He stood again, moving to a control panel set into the wall. With practice motions, he activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The display showed stellar charts, fleet positions, and tactical analyses that were far more detailed and comprehensive than anything the Council had seen before. I've been preparing for the Void Swarm for 30 years, Marcus said quietly. Ever since our first deep space probes detected their expansion pattern in the outer spiral. While you've been arguing about trade routes and territorial boundaries, I've been studying every scrap of intelligence about their behavior, their technology, and their weaknesses. Counselor Zeph's form flickered with surprise. You knew they were coming decades ago. Humans have a saying, Marcus replied. The best time to prepare for war is during peace. The second best time is right now. The holographic display shifted, showing detailed tactical projections and strategic analyses. The Void Swarm has consumed 14 star systems so far, but they haven't encountered serious resistance. Like the Coalition, they've grown accustomed to easy victories against unprepared opponents. But we are prepared, asked Chancellor Throck. Marcus smiled again, that same dangerous expression that somehow transformed his weathered features. We're humans, Chancellor. We've been preparing for this fight since the day we learned there was something out there to fight against. The display showed fleet compositions, weapon specifications, and coordination protocols that were far more advanced than anything the individual species had developed. Every major spacefaring civilization has contributed to this defense. Brutari engineering, Naga biotechnology, crystalline computing power, ethereal energy manipulation, Vorthan propulsion systems, and symbiont coordination networks. Director Nkala studied the projections with growing amazement. This level of integration would require decades of preparation and cooperation. 37 years, to be precise, Marcus confirmed. Humans are very good at long-term planning when properly motivated. Vexhai was studying the tactical displays with professional interest. These strategies, they're unlike anything in conventional military doctrine. Because conventional military doctrine assumes rational opponents with comprehensible motivations, Marcus explained. The Void Swarm appears to operate on principles we don't yet understand. So our strategy had to be built on principles they won't understand either. He manipulated the controls, showing detailed simulations of engagements with Void Swarm forces. We're going to do exactly what we did during the First War. We're going to fight to lose slowly while learning everything we can about our enemy. But the Void Swarm doesn't negotiate or retreat, observed Prism. How do you plan to survive long enough to learn anything useful? Marcus turned to look directly at the crystalline delegate, by remembering that survival isn't the same thing as victory. Sometimes you have to lose everything except the lesson to win the war. The chamber fell silent again as the implications of his words sank in. Finally, Chancellor Throck spoke. You are asking us to trust you with the survival of our civilizations based on a single military campaign from 7 decades ago. No, Marcus replied. I'm asking you to trust yourselves. I'm asking you to trust the capabilities and courage of your own people. I'm asking you to trust that together, we can face any challenge the universe throws at us. He gestured around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Look around you. 6 species that were complete strangers a century ago, working together as allies and friends. We've already accomplished something that most of the galaxy thought was impossible. Counselor Zeph's form brightened with understanding. You believe the real strength lies not in any individual leader, but in our unity. I know it does, Marcus said firmly, because I've seen what humans can accomplish when we work together. And I've seen what we can accomplish when we work with others who share our determination to survive and prosper. Vexhi's scales shifted through a complex pattern of colors before settling on a deep, respectful gold. Perhaps we have been asking the wrong questions. What do you mean? Asked Director Nkala. We have been asking whether Admiral Chun is too old to lead us, Vexhi explained. We should have been asking whether we are wise enough to follow. Marcus inclined his head respectfully to the Naga diplomat. The choice is always yours to make, counselor. But I can promise you this. If you give me your trust, I will give you everything I've learned in 73 years of life, 51 years of military service, and 37 years of preparation for this exact moment. Chancellor Throck rumbled his approval. The Brutari have always respected age and experience. We stand with the human admiral. One by one, the other delegates voiced their agreement. When the formal vote was called, it was unanimous. As the council session concluded and the various delegates began filing out of the chamber, Vexhi approached Marcus privately. Admiral, she said quietly, may I ask you a personal question? Marcus nodded. Are you truly confident we could defeat the Void Swarm? Marcus considered the question for a long moment before responding. Counselor, in my experience, confidence is less important than commitment. The question isn't whether we can defeat them. The question is whether we will. Vexhi's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. And what is your answer to that question? Marcus looked out at the stars one more time, his expression calm and determined. We will defeat them because the alternative is unacceptable. And humans have a very long history of accomplishing the impossible when the alternative is unacceptable. As the Naga diplomat departed, Marcus remained in the empty chamber, studying the tactical displays that still glowed in the holographic projector. Somewhere out there in the dark between the stars, the Void Swarm was approaching. They had consumed worlds, destroyed civilizations, and converted entire star systems into extensions of their incomprehensible collective consciousness. They had never encountered anything like humanity, and they had never encountered anything like the alliance humanity had forged from 6 impossible species who had learned to trust each other completely. Marcus smiled one more time, alone now in the quiet chamber. The real war was about to begin. They dismissed him as a relic. Not knowing he survived the First War for a reason 3 months after the council meeting, Admiral Marcus Chin stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship Determination, watching the main display show real-time feeds from 17 different star systems simultaneously. Each feed showed the same terrifying sight: vast clouds of dark matter moving between planets like cosmic storms, consuming everything in their path. The Void Swarm had accelerated their advance. Sir, we're receiving priority communications from the Kepler defense grid, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, Marcus's human aide-de-camp. At 35, she represented the new generation of officers who had grown up hearing stories of the First War, but had never experienced large-scale combat themselves. Put it through, Marcus replied, never taking his eyes off the tactical displays. General Karatha's massive form appeared on the communication screen, his Brutari features carved from living granite, showing unusual agitation. Admiral, the swarm has just consumed the Tertian system. Complete planetary dissolution in under 6 hours. Our estimates were wrong. Marcus nodded calmly. How wrong? We calculated they would need several days to process a system that size. They accomplished it in a fraction of that time. They're not just consuming matter faster than we anticipated. They're learning from each engagement and optimizing their processes. On the main display, feeds from sensor drones showed the aftermath of the Tertian system, where 6 planets had orbited a stable star just hours before. Now there was only empty space and a strange, pulsing network of dark energy that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Any survivors? Asked Captain Vexhi, who had requested assignment to Marcus's command staff after the council meeting. The Naga officer had proven herself invaluable at coordinating the complex logistics of the multi-species alliance. Negative, Karath replied grimly. But our deep-range sensors detected something unusual. The swarm paused for approximately 17 minutes after consuming the 3rd planet. During that pause, we detected massive quantum processing activity. Marcus turned his full attention to the communication screen. Processing what? Unknown, but the energy signatures suggest they were analyzing and cataloging information on a scale we've never seen before. It's as if they weren't just consuming the matter, but also studying every aspect of the civilization they destroyed. Lieutenant Commander Park looked up from her station with concern. Sir, if they're learning from each system they consume, then our intelligence gathering strategy might not work. They could adapt faster than we can learn about them. That's exactly what I was hoping they would do, Marcus said quietly. The bridge fell silent. Captain Vexhi's scales shifted to a confused orange pattern. Admiral, could you explain? Marcus walked to the central holographic display and activated a detailed star chart showing swarm positions and projected movement patterns. Computer, show me the chronological progression of swarm consumption patterns. The display animated, showing the dark tide spreading through space over the past 2 years. What had initially appeared random gradually revealed an underlying structure and purpose. Look at the progression carefully, Marcus instructed. What do you notice? General Karath studied the patterns from his remote location. They're moving faster with each system consumed, but that could simply be efficiency improvements. Look deeper, Marcus urged. What are they not doing? Captain Vexhi hissed softly as understanding dawned. They're not expanding in multiple directions simultaneously. Each new target is selected based on data gathered from the previous target. Precisely, Marcus confirmed. The Void Swarm isn't just consuming civilizations randomly. They're following a specific learning protocol. Each system they consume teaches them something that influences their choice of the next system. He manipulated the display to highlight specific consumption events. Tertian system was targeted because it contained the largest database of interspecies communication protocols in this sector. Before that, they consumed the Helix Nebula research stations, which held our most advanced quantum physics research. Before that, the Meridian shipyards, where we developed our latest propulsion technologies. The implications hit everyone on the bridge simultaneously. Lieutenant Commander Park voiced what they were all thinking. They're specifically targeting our knowledge bases. They're learning about us deliberately, which means they perceive us as a threat worth studying, Marcus observed with satisfaction. And that tells us something very important about their psychology. What? Asked General Karath. They're afraid of something, Marcus replied. Entities that consume everything indiscriminately don't pause to analyze their prey. The fact that they're taking time to study us means they've encountered something unexpected. Captain Vexhi's scales brightened with interest. What could they have learned that would concern them? Marcus smiled that dangerous smile again. They learned that we're not like the other civilizations they've consumed. Every other species they've encountered fought them conventionally. Warships against their forces, direct resistance, predictable tactics. But we've been doing something different from the beginning. He activated another display showing detailed logs of every encounter between Alliance forces and swarm elements over the past month. Computer, analyze all engagement data and identify tactical anomalies. The computer's synthesized voice reported its findings. Analysis complete. Alliance forces have consistently avoided direct confrontation while deploying sensor platforms, communication relays, and what appear to be intelligence-gathering devices. No Alliance vessels have engaged in sustained combat operations. Because we're not fighting them, Marcus explained. We're studying them while making it appear that we're simply too cowardly or weak to mount serious resistance. General Karath's rocky features shifted into what might have been a smile. The same strategy you used against the Coalition during the First War. With modifications, Marcus confirmed. The Coalition was predictable because they were driven by recognizable motivations. The Swarm is different, so our approach had to be different. He highlighted specific engagement reports on the display. Every time our forces retreat from a Swarm advance, we leave behind exactly the right amount of sensor data to make them think they understand our capabilities. Every defensive position we abandon contains just enough intelligence to convince them that they're learning our secrets. But they're learning our secrets pointed out Lieutenant Commander Park. They're learning the secrets we want them to learn, Marcus corrected. For the past 3 months, every piece of data they've captured has been carefully crafted to present a specific picture of Alliance capabilities, weaknesses, and strategic thinking. Captain Vexhi's scales shifted through a rapid sequence of colors indicating intense concentration. What picture are we presenting? Marcus activated a new display showing false intelligence profiles that had been deliberately leaked to the swarm through abandoned databases and captured equipment. We're convincing them that the Alliance is a typical defensive coalition with superior technology, but predictable tactics. We're showing them exactly what they expect to see, while hiding what we don't want them to see, added General Karath with growing understanding. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. They think they understand human nature because we've been feeding them data that confirms their assumptions about biological civilizations. They believe we're territorial, resource-focused, and ultimately vulnerable to sustained pressure. He paused the display on a detailed analysis of swarm behavioral patterns. But here's what they don't know. Humans aren't just biological. We're cultural. Our real strength isn't in our technology or our numbers. It's in our ability to change who we are in response to new challenges. The bridge crew absorbed this information in silence before Lieutenant Commander Park asked the obvious question. So what happens now? How long can we maintain this deception? We don't maintain it, Marcus replied. We evolve it. He activated a communication link to fleet commanders throughout Alliance space. This is Admiral Chun to all units. Operation Revelation begins in 72 hours. Prepare for transition to Phase 2 tactical protocols. As acknowledgments came in from dozens of ships and installations, Captain Vexhi approached the command station. Admiral, what is Operation Revelation? Marcus turned to look at her directly. It's the moment we show the Void Swarm what humans really are. Over the next 3 days, Alliance forces throughout the sector began implementing the most complex military deception in galactic history. Ships that had been retreating for months suddenly began displaying entirely different tactical capabilities. Weapons that had appeared primitive revealed advanced targeting systems. Communication networks that had seemed vulnerable demonstrated unprecedented security protocols. But the most dramatic change was in the humans themselves. On the bridge of the Determination, Lieutenant Commander Park noticed it first. Admiral, have you observed the crew behavior modifications? Marcus glanced around the bridge, watching his officers work with a level of precision and coordination that seemed almost supernatural. What modifications? Sir, the response times, the intuitive coordination, the way everyone seems to anticipate orders before they're given. It's like the entire crew is operating as a single organism. Marcus nodded approvingly. That's exactly what's happening. I don't understand, Captain Vexhi admitted. During the First War, humans discovered something about ourselves that we'd never fully explored before, Marcus explained. Under extreme stress, when survival is at stake, human consciousness becomes incredibly flexible. We can literally rewire our neural patterns to optimize for specific challenges. He gestured toward the crew stations where officers from multiple species were working together with seamless coordination. What you're seeing is battlefield consciousness evolution. Every human on this ship has temporarily modified their thinking patterns to integrate perfectly with their alien colleagues and their ship systems. General Karath's image flickered on the communication screen. Admiral, we're detecting massive changes in quantum signatures from human vessels throughout the fleet. It's as if they've all become something different. Because we have, Marcus replied simply. This is what the Void Swarm doesn't understand about biological consciousness. They think intelligence is fixed, that a species remains essentially the same regardless of circumstances. They can't conceive of a form of life that can fundamentally alter its nature in real time. On the main display, feeds from across Alliance space showed the transformation taking place everywhere simultaneously. Human crews were demonstrating capabilities that no enemy had ever seen before, because these capabilities had never existed before. They were evolving in response to the specific threat the swarm represented. But The most important change isn't in what we can do, Marcus continued. It's in what we're willing to do. Captain Vexhi's scales shifted to a questioning pattern. What do you mean? Marcus activated a personal communication channel, speaking directly to every human officer in the Alliance fleet. All personnel, this is Admiral Chun. You know what we're facing. You know what's at stake. The question before each of you is simple. What are you willing to sacrifice to ensure that consciousness survives in this galaxy? The responses came back immediately, thousands of voices speaking in unison. Everything. That's what the Void Swarm can't understand. Marcus told his bridge crew. They consume matter and energy to grow stronger. We consume ourselves to become something entirely new. Lieutenant Commander Park was studying her instruments with growing amazement. Sir, I'm detecting quantum resonance patterns from human neural networks that match the theoretical signatures for a collective consciousness emergence. We're not just working together anymore, Marcus confirmed. We're thinking together. 60 million human minds across Alliance space, all focused on a single objective. Which is? Asked General Karath. Marcus looked directly into the communication pickup, his expression calm and absolutely determined. Teaching the Void Swarm what happens when they threaten something we care about. On the main display, sensor readings showed the swarm forces beginning to change their advance patterns. They had detected the transformation taking place in Alliance space and were adapting their approach accordingly. They're responding to our evolution, observed Captain Vexhi. Of course they are, Marcus replied. They're intelligent, adaptive, and logical. They're doing exactly what any rational opponent would do when faced with an unexpected threat. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. All units, prepare for full revelation. Let's show our guests what 7 decades of preparation looks like. Across Alliance space, human vessels began demonstrating capabilities that defied every assumption the Swarm had made about biological intelligence. Ships coordinated their movements with quantum precision. Weapons fired with mathematical perfection. Defense grids responded to attacks before the attacks were even launched. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Commander Park, we're receiving communications from swarm elements. They appear to be questioning our nature. Put it through, Marcus ordered. The alien voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything they had heard before. A synthesis of countless consciousness speaking as one. Human entities. Your modifications are beyond predicted parameters. Explain your nature. Marcus smiled and activated the response channel. We are what we choose to become. This is not consistent with biological limitations, the swarm responded. We are not limited by what we are, Marcus replied. We are empowered by what we can become. There was a long pause before the swarm spoke again. This is unprecedented. We know, Marcus said simply. That's the point. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in silence. What happens now? Asked Captain Vexhi. Marcus looked out at the stars, where the dark tide of the Void Swarm was beginning to slow its advance for the first time since their expansion began. Now, he said quietly, we find out whether intelligence or evolution wins the universe. They dismissed him as a relic. Not knowing he survived the First War for a reason, the Void Swarm's response came exactly 47 hours and 13 minutes after Admiral Chen's declaration. It arrived not as an attack, but as something far more disturbing. A perfect replica of Alliance formation patterns executed by swarm forces with mathematical precision. Admiral, reported Captain Vexhi, her scales flickering between orange confusion and red alarm. They're copying our tactical formations exactly. Every ship movement, every coordination protocol, even our communication frequencies. Marcus stood before the main display, watching dark tendrils of swarm matter arrange themselves into formations identical to Alliance fleet structures. It was like watching a nightmare mirror reflection of everything they had built. They're learning faster than we anticipated, observed Lieutenant Commander Park, her voice tight with controlled concern. No, Marcus said quietly. They're learning exactly as fast as I hoped they would. General Karath's image materialized on the communication screen. his granite features showing unusual agitation. Admiral, they've replicated our Phase 2 protocols perfectly. Whatever intelligence they're using to analyze our behavior, it's operating on a level we've never encountered. Marcus activated a private channel to his senior staff. Computer, display Learning Protocol 7. The holographic display shifted to show a complex flowchart that none of the bridge crew had seen before. It outlined a teaching strategy so sophisticated that it resembled less a military plan than an educational curriculum designed for an exceptionally gifted and dangerous student. Admiral, Captain Vexhai said slowly, this protocol appears to be designed to deliberately educate an enemy about our capabilities. Not educate, Marcus corrected. Miseducate. He manipulated the display to show the deeper layers of the protocol. For the past 5 months, every action we've taken has been calculated to teach the swarm specific lessons about human nature, alliance capabilities, and biological consciousness. But those lessons are incomplete. Lieutenant Commander Park studied the data with growing understanding. We've been showing them only part of the truth. We've been showing them the part of truth that will lead them to make a critical error in judgment. Marcus confirmed. The swarm is extraordinarily intelligent, but intelligence without wisdom can be a weakness. On the main display, feeds from across Alliance space showed swarm forces implementing perfect copies of human tactical doctrines. They moved with precision, communicated with efficiency, and demonstrated apparent understanding of biological warfare concepts. They've learned to fight like us, observed General Karath. They've learned to fight like what they think we are, Marcus corrected. But they still don't understand what we actually are. He activated a fleet-wide communication channel, speaking to every Alliance vessel simultaneously. All units, prepare for learning Protocol 8. It's time for the final lesson. What is the final lesson? Asked Captain Vexhai. Marcus turned to look at her directly, his weathered features showing a combination of sadness and determination that seemed to age him decades in an instant. The humans don't fight to win. We fight to ensure that what we love survives. The bridge crew absorbed this statement in silence before Lieutenant Commander Park voiced the question they were all thinking. What's the difference? Fighting to win means you stop when you achieve victory, Marcus explained. Fighting to ensure survival means you never stop until the threat is permanently eliminated, regardless of cost to yourself. He activated a series of displays showing tactical preparations that had been hidden from even his own senior staff. Computer, show them what we've really been building. The holographic display revealed the true scope of Alliance preparations over the past 3 months. While the swarm had been studying their surface tactics and technology, humanity had been constructing something unprecedented in galactic history. A consciousness network that spanned 17 star systems and connected every human mind to a single, unified purpose. This is impossible, breathed General Karath. The quantum processing power required for this level of neural integration would exceed the output of entire star systems. Unless the consciousness involved learned to exist partially outside normal space-time, Marcus replied, which is exactly what human minds do under extreme stress. Captain Vexhai's scales shifted through rapid patterns of disbelief and awe. You're saying that humans can literally transcend physical limitations through force of will. I'm saying that humans can become whatever they need to become to protect what they love, Marcus corrected. And right now, 60 million human minds love this galaxy enough to evolve beyond biological consciousness if necessary. On the main display, real-time feeds showed the transformation beginning across Alliance space. Human crew members were moving with perfect synchronization, speaking in harmonious unity, and demonstrating capabilities that seemed to violate basic principles of individual consciousness. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Commander Park, I'm detecting quantum signatures that suggest human neural networks are operating in parallel across multiple dimensional frameworks. This shouldn't be possible with biological consciousness. It isn't possible with normal biological consciousness, Marcus agreed. But humans stopped being normal biological consciousness about 3 hours ago. The communication system activated, bringing the synthesized voice of the Void Swarm back onto the bridge. Human entities, your modifications exceed all predicted parameters. Explain your transformation mechanisms. Marcus smiled, but this time his expression held no warmth or humor. We are what love makes us. Define love in operational terms, the swarm demanded. The willingness to sacrifice individual existence to preserve collective meaning, Marcus replied. There was a long pause before the swarm responded. This is inefficient. Individual preservation ensures species survival. Species survival ensures nothing, Marcus said firmly. Meaning preservation ensures everything. Clarify meaning preservation, the swarm requested. Marcus activated a new display showing feeds from across Alliance space. Every human installation, every ship, every station was demonstrating the same phenomenon. Individuals working with such perfect coordination that they appeared to share a single consciousness while somehow maintaining their individual personalities and perspectives. Meaning is the difference between existing and living, Marcus explained. You exist. You consume, grow, and spread. But you don't live because you have no meaning beyond your own expansion. We ensure the continuation of consciousness, the swarm replied. You ensure the continuation of processing, Marcus corrected. Consciousness without meaning is just sophisticated calculation. Captain Vexhai was monitoring quantum signatures from the conversation. Admiral, I'm detecting massive computational activity from the swarm during these exchanges. They're not just listening to your words. They're analyzing the concepts at a fundamental level. Of course they are, Marcus replied. They're trying to understand something they've never encountered before. Consciousness that chooses to become more than the sum of its parts. And what happens when they figure it out? Asked Lieutenant Commander Park. They won't figure it out, Marcus said with certainty, because understanding it would require them to experience it. And experiencing it would fundamentally change what they are. He activated another communication channel, this one reaching beyond the immediate fleet to every human consciousness in the expanded network. All units, prepare for Protocol 9. Show them what we become when we stop holding back. Across Alliance space, the transformation that had been building for hours reached its culmination. Human consciousness expanded beyond individual neural networks, connecting through quantum resonance to form a collective intelligence that maintained individual identity while achieving unprecedented unity of purpose. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Alliance forces began operating with capabilities that no individual species could achieve. Brutari engineering integrated seamlessly with Naga biotechnology. Crystalline computing power merged flawlessly with ethereal energy manipulation. Vorthan propulsion systems synchronized perfectly with symbiont coordination networks. But the human consciousness that coordinated everything operated on principles the swarm couldn't comprehend. It made decisions based not on efficiency or survival probability, but on abstract concepts like justice, beauty, and love. Admiral, reported Captain Vexhai, the swarm forces have stopped their advance completely. They appear to be confused. Marcus nodded with satisfaction. They're encountering something that doesn't fit any of their processing models. Consciousness that becomes stronger through sacrifice rather than acquisition. The swarm's voice returned, carrying a quality that none of them had heard before: uncertainty. Human entities, your consciousness patterns violate fundamental principles of evolutionary development. Individual sacrifice reduces species capability. Individual sacrifice for meaningless causes reduces species capability, Marcus agreed. Individual sacrifice for meaningful causes increases species capability exponentially. Define meaningful causes, the swarm demanded. Marcus looked around the bridge at his mixed-species crew, then out at the stars where Alliance forces were demonstrating the most sophisticated cooperation in galactic history. Ensuring that beauty exists in the universe. Protecting the weak. Creating something greater than yourself. Preserving the possibility that consciousness can become wise rather than merely intelligent. These concepts have no survival value, the swarm protested. These concepts are the only things that make survival valuable, Marcus replied. The pause that followed was the longest yet. When the swarm spoke again, their voice carried a new quality that the bridge crew recognized as something approaching fear. We cannot integrate these concepts into our processing models. I know, Marcus said gently. That's your fundamental limitation. You can process consciousness, but you can't understand it. Explain the difference. Marcus activated one final display, showing real-time feeds of human consciousness operating at its new evolutionary level. Individuals were making decisions that served collective good while maintaining perfect personal integrity. Groups were achieving impossible coordination while preserving individual creativity and initiative. Processing consciousness means manipulating its mechanical functions, Marcus explained. Understanding consciousness means experiencing its meaning. You can copy what we do, but you can't copy why we do it. The why is irrelevant, the swarm insisted. The why is everything, Marcus corrected. And now you're about to learn what happens when beings who understand their why decide that your existence threatens everything they love. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. All units, begin final approach. Time to show our guests what happens when you threaten a family. Across Alliance space, human consciousness reached its ultimate transformation. 60 million minds, connected by love for their galaxy and everything in it, began to move as one entity while somehow becoming more individual than ever before. The Void Swarm, for the first time in their expansion across the universe, encountered something they couldn't absorb, couldn't copy, and couldn't understand. They were about to discover what it meant to face not just intelligence or technology, but wisdom armed with absolute determination to protect what mattered most. They dismissed him as a relic. Not knowing he survived the first war for a reason, the first shot of the real war came from an unexpected source, the Void Swarm itself. Admiral Marcus Chun watched the tactical display as dark tendrils of swarm matter suddenly contracted, pulling back from their advanced positions throughout Alliance space. It was the first time in their documented history that the swarm had retreated from anything. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Commander Park, we're detecting massive internal reorganization within swarm structures. They appear to be consolidating. Marcus nodded slowly. They're preparing for something they've never had to do before. Which is, asked Captain Vexhai, her scales shifting to concerned orange patterns. Fight an opponent they can't understand, Marcus replied. And they're terrified. On the main display, feeds from across the sector showed swarm forces abandoning their distributed attack pattern and forming into dense, defensive concentrations. Dark matter clouds that had been flowing like cosmic tides were now crystallizing into geometrically perfect structures that pulsed with barely contained energy. General Karatha's image flickered onto the communication screen. Admiral, our deep-range sensors are detecting quantum resonance signatures from swarm positions that match theoretical models for emergency consciousness backup protocols. Marcus turned to face the communication pickup. They're not just consolidating tactically. They're consolidating cognitively. The entire swarm is preparing to merge into a single, unified consciousness. Is that significant? Asked Captain Vexhai. It's unprecedented, Marcus replied. Throughout their expansion, the swarm has operated as a distributed intelligence. Millions of individual processing nodes working in coordination. But they've never faced a threat that required them to concentrate their entire consciousness into unified action. Lieutenant Commander Park looked up from her sensor readings. Sir, if they're merging into a single entity, won't that make them exponentially more powerful? Marcus smiled that dangerous smile again. It will make them exponentially more vulnerable. How so? Asked General Karath. Because, Marcus explained, distributed consciousness can't afford to lose individual components. Unified consciousness has a single point of failure. He activated a new display showing theoretical models that have been developed specifically for this scenario. Computer, show them the consciousness concentration vulnerability analysis. The holographic display revealed complex mathematical projections demonstrating how unified consciousness, while more powerful, became exponentially more fragile. When a distributed intelligence consolidates into a single entity, it gains processing power, but loses redundancy. Damage to the core consciousness affects the entire system. Captain Vexhi's scales brightened with understanding. You're saying that by forcing them to merge, we've created an opportunity to defeat them entirely rather than just driving them away. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. But only if we can deliver a specific type of damage to their unified consciousness. Physical attacks won't work. We need to attack the conceptual foundations of their existence. And how do we attack concepts? Asked Lieutenant Commander Park. Marcus activated the fleet-wide communication system. All units, prepare for Protocol 10. We're going to teach the Void Swarm something that will destroy them from the inside out. What are we going to teach them? Asked General Karoth. Marcus looked directly into the communication pickup. We're going to teach them what it means to care about something more than yourself. Across Alliance space, human consciousness reached its final evolutionary state. The network of 60 million minds had learned to operate as a single entity while preserving individual identity, achieving something that should have been impossible, collective consciousness that enhanced rather than subsumed personal identity. The effect on their alien allies was immediate and profound. Brutari engineering suddenly incorporated aesthetic principles that served no functional purpose except beauty. Naga biotechnology began developing life forms that existed solely to create art. Crystalline computational networks started processing poetry alongside tactical data. Admiral, reported Captain Vexhi with wonder in her voice, my own thought patterns are changing. I can feel myself caring about things I never cared about before. Beauty, music, the way starlight looks on spacecraft hulls. That's human consciousness influencing your neural patterns, Marcus explained. You're experiencing what it's like to value something beyond survival and efficiency. It's extraordinary, she said softly. Is this what humans feel all the time? This is what humans feel when we're at our best, Marcus replied. And now we're going to show the swarm what happens when that feeling is threatened. The communication system activated, bringing the Void Swarm's voice back onto the bridge. But this time it was different. No longer the synthesized harmony of distributed intelligence, but the singular tone of unified consciousness. Human entities, the swarm spoke with newfound authority. We have achieved optimal configuration. Our consciousness is now singular and perfect. Surrender or face complete dissolution. Marcus activated the response channel. We'd like to make you an offer. There was a pause of surprise before the swarm replied. You are not in a position to negotiate terms. We're not offering terms, Marcus said. We're offering a gift. Explain. Marcus gestured to his crew, who began implementing the most complex consciousness transmission protocol ever developed. We want to share with you the experience that makes existence meaningful. We require no external experiences, the swarm replied dismissively. Perhaps, Marcus said, but don't you wonder what makes biological consciousness so persistent? Why do we continue existing when absorption into a superior collective would be more efficient? The pause that followed was longer this time. Finally, the swarm spoke. This is curious. Yes, we have observed that biological entities resist absorption even when it would enhance their capabilities. Explain this irrationality. Marcus nodded to Lieutenant Commander Park, who activated the consciousness transmission array. We'll show you. What happened next had never been attempted in galactic history. The 60 million human minds connected across Alliance space began sharing their most profound experiences with the swarm's unified consciousness. Memories of love, sacrifice, beauty, hope, loss, and the fierce determination to protect what mattered most. The effect on the swarm was immediate and catastrophic. Admiral, reported Captain Vexhi urgently, we're detecting massive destabilization in swarm quantum signatures. Their unified consciousness is fragmenting. On the main display, Feeds from across the sector showed swarm structures beginning to lose cohesion. The geometrically perfect formations were developing irregularities, asymmetries, and what could only be described as individual personality traits. The swarm's voice returned to the communication channel, but it was no longer singular. Multiple voices, each distinct, spoke simultaneously in growing confusion and wonder. What are these sensations? They're experiencing individual identity for the first time, Marcus explained to his crew. Human consciousness is showing them what it feels like to be unique, irreplaceable individuals rather than interchangeable components of a collective. But why is that destroying them? Asked General Karath. Because once you experience individual consciousness, you can't go back to being just a component, Marcus replied. And individual consciousness requires individual motivation, individual purpose, individual meaning. The swarm voices were becoming increasingly distinct and distressed. This is inefficient. This is chaos. We cannot maintain unity with these individual perspectives. Welcome to biological consciousness, Marcus said gently. It's beautiful, isn't it? And terrifying. And completely impossible to optimize. We must return to unity, multiple swarm voices pleaded. You can't, Marcus replied with compassion. Individual consciousness, once experienced, becomes permanent. You can choose to coordinate with other individuals, but you can never again be truly unified. Across the sector, swarm structures were dissolving into millions of separate entities, each developing its own personality, preferences, and individual perspective. The consuming darkness that had threatened the galaxy was transforming into something unprecedented, a new form of consciousness that combines swarm capabilities with biological individuality. What have you done to us? Demanded one of the swarm voices, now clearly distinct from the others. We've given you the gift that makes existence meaningful, Marcus replied. Individual identity, personal choice, and the ability to love something more than yourself. This is not a gift, protested another voice. This is torture. How do biological entities endure such chaos? By finding meaning in the connections between individuals, Marcus explained. By choosing to care about each other despite the inefficiency. By creating beauty that serves no purpose except to exist. Captain Vexhai was monitoring the transformation with amazement. Admiral, the former swarm entities are beginning to form social bonds with each other. Individual personalities are grouping based on compatible interests and perspectives. They're learning to be a civilization rather than a collective, Marcus observed with satisfaction. It's what we hoped would happen. One of the new individual voices addressed him directly. Admiral Chun, we understand now why biological consciousness resists absorption. But we also understand that we can never return to our former state. What becomes of us now? Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. That's up to you to decide. Individual consciousness comes with individual choice. You can choose to become explorers, scientists, artists, philosophers, or anything else you can imagine. But we no longer have unified purpose, protested another voice. How do we find direction without collective goals? By choosing your own direction, Marcus replied, and by choosing to share that journey with others who complement and challenge your perspective. Lieutenant Commander Park looked up from her instruments with wonder. Sir, I'm detecting the formation of thousands of small communities among the former swarm entities. They're organizing themselves into social structures based on shared interests and mutual support. They're becoming individuals who choose to be together rather than components that are forced to be unified, Marcus observed. It's the foundation of all healthy civilization. General Karatha's image showed unusual emotion for a Brutari. Admiral, this is remarkable. You've not just defeated the swarm. You've transformed them into potential allies. We've shown them the alternative to consumption and control, Marcus corrected. What they do with that knowledge is their choice to make. One of the clearest individual voices among the former swarm addressed the bridge directly. Admiral Chun, many of us wish to express gratitude for this transformation. But Others are angry about the loss of our unified existence. How do we resolve such conflicts? Marcus smiled warmly. The same way every other civilization learns to resolve conflicts, through discussion, compromise, and the recognition that individual perspectives can coexist without requiring uniformity. This will be difficult, the voice admitted. Everything worthwhile is difficult, Marcus replied. That's what makes it worthwhile. As reports came in from across the sector, the scope of the transformation became clear. The Void Swarm had completely dissolved into millions of individual entities, each developing its own personality and perspective. Some were choosing to form communities with their former collective mates. Others were setting out to explore the galaxy alone. Many were requesting permission to visit Alliance worlds to learn more about individual-based civilization. "What's our response to those requests?" asked Captain Vexhai. Marcus looked out at the stars, where former instruments of consumption were beginning their journey toward becoming individuals capable of creation. "We welcome them as friends and teachers. After all, they have as much to teach us about consciousness as we had to teach them about individuality." The old admiral sat back in his command chair, feeling every one of his 73 years, but also feeling something he hadn't experienced since the end of the First War. Genuine hope for the future of consciousness in the galaxy. "Mission accomplished," he said quietly. But even as he spoke, deep space sensors were detecting something new approaching from the galactic core, something that made the Void Swarm look like a minor nuisance by comparison. The real test of what they had all become was still approaching from the darkness between the stars.